Hi everyone, welcome to Mountain Home Stories. As many of you know, I am currently reading Alice Chapin's The True Story of Humpty Dumpty, and this video is the third episode. If you are new to the channel, I encourage you to catch up on the first two episodes before diving into today's video. I hope you enjoyed the story and may it serve as a refined tool for sharpening your English as we read together. A gentle reminder, if you haven't subscribed yet to Mountain Home Stories, then please consider subscribing, and now let's begin. Chapter 8. The Court of the Fairy Queen. At first, Meg thought she was alone, but soon she saw a lady standing near, picking pale yellow blossoms. She wore a green gown, and her feet were bare. On her bright hair was a little crown that seemed made of wee gold stars, and her face was very grave and sweet. Meg went up to her timidly. "Please," she said with a catch in her voice, "will you tell me the way to Fairyland? I am in a great hurry." "What do you want to do in Fairyland?" said the lady kindly. "Are you in trouble?" No, that is a little. I want to tell the Fairy Queen something she ought to know, and I want to let Mother Goose know how sorry I am that I was disobedient and naughty. And of course, if I could, I should like to help Dick save Humpty Dumpty." "You look sad," said the lady, and put her arm about Meg. "I want Bab and Dick, that's all," said Meg simply. And of course I'm sorry and worried about things, you know." The lady smiled quite merrily. Then she lifted Meg in her arms and kissed her softly. "Dear little girl," she said. "Sweet Meg. You have had a harder journey than Bab, but you are at the end of it." Who are you, please?" whispered Meg, wondering that she knew their names. "You may call me the Lady of Dreams Come True," said the green-gowned stranger. "But that is not my name. Now run along quickly to the court of the fairies." "Oh, but I am so dusty and dirty," exclaimed Meg. "I can't go to court this way." "You have your pink silk dress with you," said the Lady of Dreams Come True, laughing. Meg looked down in surprise. Over her left arm hung her once treasured pink gown. Somehow, among these wonderful flowers and beside this beautiful lady, it did not look nearly so pretty as it once had. She let it slip to the ground. "I must have been very silly," she said half to herself, "to want to bring that to Make-Believe Land." The lady laughed again in a pleased way. "Then you must go to court as you are," she said. "But I think that you look very nice." Meg looked down again and saw that her white dress was now as fresh and clean as though it had just been washed. Why, she stammered. "How wonderful! It might almost be Fairyland already." "It is Fairyland already," said her new friend. "Look." Over the flowers, Meg could see 1,000 faint and shining wings. The air shimmered and glinted with them. The flowers swayed softly beneath their fanning. The daintiest, loveliest faces and forms showed dimly between every glistening, misty pair of these wonderful wings. Meg gazed bewildered. "Oh, how beautiful!" she cried softly. "Goodbye, Meg," was all the lady would say. She seemed to be growing transparent and misty herself. "Goodbye," cried Meg. "Oh, shall I see you again?" "Oh, yes, she answered, smiling, and seemed to become a little less distinct. Someday, murmured Dreams Come True, and straightway vanished into the soft rainbow-tinted air. As Meg walked on through the flower meadow, the delicate wings and faces grew more and more distinct and seemed to crowd ever closer and closer about her. Everywhere they floated, like faintly colored mist wreaths, like the ghosts of big, beautiful butterflies, like flowers made alive. Everywhere the light glowed, brilliant and yet soft, like a huge liquid opal. Sometimes it seemed to Meg to be shot with the palest pink, sometimes the purest blue, sometimes the most exquisite green, the clearest yellow, the faintest lavender. And what with the flowers and the wings and the magical colors in the air, Meg felt as though she were moving through the heart of a great rainbow. About her feet and against her dress swayed and bumped the big bright flowers. Some of them were so tall that they touched her shoulders with their sweet, nodding heads. Sometimes they were so tiny that she almost stepped on them, though of course she tried not to. The sky was filled with rainbow-colored clouds. A delicious perfume hung everywhere. In the distance rose slender turrets, gold and rose-colored and snow-white, from the mist of flowers and wings. And as Meg listened, she could hear any number of voices singing in the sweetest chorus imaginable, a little soft song about roses and clouds and dew and starbeams. There was no doubt about it, no doubt at all, as the Lady of Dreams Come True had said. She really was in fairyland at last. These airy beings, floating and fluttering, singing and crowding on every hand, were certainly the fairies, the dainty folk whose queen she was seeking. Meg resolved not to loiter any longer in that delicious field, but to hurry across it as fast as she could and to find the queen. But when she tried to move more quickly, she found that the soft, transparent forms were holding her back. She struggled for a minute or two in vain. She felt hands as light as raindrops on her wrists, and at last she heard a high, sweet laugh. Then the clearest of bell-like voices said, "Why, mortal, what are you doing here? And why do you struggle so hard against the fairy folk?" "Oh, please," panted Meg, "take me to the fairy queen." Again came the light, soft laugh. "Not so fast, mortal. That is easy to ask. Do you think our queen is so easy to see? You must state your business." "I must see the queen," cried Meg. It's very important. It's," speaking with a sort of rush, "it's about the wicked king and the spell in the crystal box." Instantly, an angry chorus filled the air, and Meg found herself held more tightly than before. "How dare she?" cried the fairies. "How dare she speak of the wicked king and the spell here? She must know either the wicked king or Grump." "Yes," Meg tried to explain, speaking eagerly, "and Grump told me." But at this point the chorus rose to the shrillest rage. "Grump! Grump! She knows him! She admits it! Away with her! She shall not live another hour! No, no! Turn her into a rat or an oyster! She is a friend of our dear lady's enemy, the great dwarf." "Indeed, I'm not a friend of Grump's," exclaimed Meg indignantly. "You just ask him if I am." But they would not listen to her, and she felt herself being hurried away, faster and faster and faster with every second, until she was sure she should die if they did not let her stop to take breath. "Please, please," she panted as they pulled her along. "I can explain if you will just wait one moment." But they were far too busy abusing her to hear a word she said. "Oh dear, dear, dear," sighed poor Meg to herself. "Grump must be a nasty person if just mentioning his name has this effect." As she was dragged along through the flower meadow, she kept repeating over and over, "I must see the queen. I must tell her. I must warn her." And suddenly, she never knew how, but she suspected Mother Goose, or Dreams Come True, of having something to do with it. She really did break from the grasp of her captors and dash on across the field alone. She could hear the sweet, excited voices of the fairies and could feel their wings fan the back of her neck as they followed her. But at that moment she caught sight of a low, flowery hedge with a gateway made of 2 tall trees wreathed with blossoming vines, and through that gate she dashed just as the fairies behind her cried, She has gone into the palace garden. She has gone into the queen's presence. How dare she?" Meg was in the loveliest place she had ever seen, but she was too frightened to think of its magical beauty just then. By the time the fairy folk came crowding into the garden after her, she had espied a lady sitting on a throne with giant roses all about and fairy court ladies standing in rows with folded wings. "Oh, are you the queen?" she asked eagerly, running forward. "Yes," said the beautiful lady, and all the fairies stopped and stood motionless as she spoke. She had great shining wings that moved up and down, trembling like flower petals, and her face gleamed with a wonderfully sunny smile. And sometimes she swayed a little like a very tall lily in a high wind. And no one could say what color her eyes were, nor what sort of features she had. But one knew at once that she was surely the queen of the fairy folk. "Yes," she said again, "I am the queen. What is it that you wish of me?" "Oh, your majesty!" cried the fairies who had followed Meg, and they all bent low and spread out their wings as she spoke, just the way a bird sometimes does, close to the ground when it begins to rain. "Oh, your majesty, do not listen to her. She is a friend of the great dwarf and the wicked king." "Is that true?" asked the queen, bending over Meg and flashing her eyes at her until she felt as though she were looking deep into two huge stars. "No," cried Meg boldly, "it isn't." "Oh!" exclaimed the fairies angrily. "How truly wicked she is, and how she lies! She told us she was a friend of theirs." "I said I knew Grump," said Meg, ready to cry. "I never said he was my friend. He's dreadful and tried to kill me. And as for the wicked king, only saw him in some magic pot steam." "What is all this about?" asked the queen, frowning slightly. "Come, little girl, tell your story. We will listen." So Meg told her story from the time she met the great dwarf. The queen was much interested, and she thanked her for warning her about the wicked king's wish to steal her valuable spell. And the fairies, who had wanted to turn Meg into a rat or an oyster, looked very much ashamed of themselves and hung down their wings in a very humble manner. "But," said the queen, "how did it happen that you, a little mortal girl, were traveling through the wonderful wood alone, so very, very far from your own country?" Then Meg remembered her real errand and explained at greater length, telling all about Mother Goose's directions and everything from the very beginning. At last it was all told, and the queen sat for a space in silence, as though considering what she had heard. At last she sent two of the fairies for the crystal box containing the spell. When they returned, bearing it between them, she opened the little casket and took out of it a roll of paper as blue as the sky, covered with writing that glowed like orange fire. "Listen," said the fairy queen, and then read aloud. "Closed door, closed shell, locked box, sealed well, shut bolt, shut gate, yield up your contents straight. All things that fastened are, shake off the spell or bar. All strange disguises flee, everything held, go free. Closed door, closed shell, yield to the opening spell." Now, do you understand that? I think so, partly," said Meg doubtfully. "But what am I to do with it, please?" "Take it to your brother," said the queen. "With it, he can free Humpty Dumpty and fulfill Mother Goose's command. He has only to read it to Humpty Dumpty at the same time, striking the great eggshell with something hard and sharp, and the young prince will be free and in his own shape once more." "Oh, splendid!" cried Meg joyfully, clapping her hands and dancing first on one foot and then on the other. "The next difficulty," continued the queen, will be for your brother to escape. Humpty Dumpty can escape from the wall well enough, but your brother cannot be freed by the spell, for he will be neither bound nor locked up, in neither shell, prison, nor box, behind no gate, no door, and no bars. Yet he will be on the top of the city wall, which is near the ground on the inside, but far, far from it on the outside. For this he has only to whisper, "Help me," into one of the red flowers on the vine that grows on the outer side of the wall. Then he can clamber down by the help of these tiny climbing creepers. They are fairy flowers and like to give aid. They cannot grow inside the city of the wicked king, but they come as near as possible and are always hoping that someday they may be able to help someone. Now, little mortal, take my spell and hurry back with it." "Oh, but, Your Majesty," stammered Meg, I was told to serve you for a year and a day, or until I had done you some great service." The queen laughed until it sounded like 100 little gold bells. "Dear child, you have served me," she said. "Have you already forgotten the warning you gave me?" "Oh!" exclaimed Meg, and was dumb. She had never thought of that. Chapter 9. Under the Sea of Glass. Of course, when Dick found himself alone in the wonderful wood, he was as surprised as his two sisters had been, and just a wee bit frightened too, though, being a boy, he would not admit it even to himself. He trotted down the wood path, which twisted and turned like a long snake, with his hands in his trousers pockets and a very determined heart. He was extremely proud of having been chosen by Mother Goose for the task of rescuing her son Humpty Dumpty, and thought that it showed how really sensible she was after all. For of course, those things, rescuing prisoners and all that, were always done by men. He thought it a pity that neither she nor Busy Buzz had given him any clearer directions about getting to the city of the wicked king, but he hoped to meet plenty of people from whom he could ask the way. So he hurried on quite cheerfully, earnest and excited, into the depths of the wonderful wood. And very soon the wood grew lighter and thinner, and finally came to an end altogether. And lo and behold, there he was, on the shore of the Sea of Glass. You see, Dick's journey through the wonderful wood had been short, for all his adventures were to follow. The Sea of Glass looked like a big green mirror, polished and clear and smooth. It did not look like water, nor ice, nor like anything except just what it was. Through the glass surface, Dick could see faintly moving shadows and ripples. Evidently, there was water underneath. As a matter of fact, it had once been a real, regular sea, only the wicked king had put a glass lid over it and screwed it on for all eternity. Dick stared at the Sea of Glass for a minute, very nervously and doubtfully. Then, thinking of Humpty Dumpty, he stepped manfully out upon it. It was very slippery, but for a little while he got along fairly well by holding his hands out to balance himself and keeping his legs very far apart. Then suddenly he stumbled a little and swayed, and as he did so, something slipped from his pocket and fell with a sharp cling on the glass. It was his jackknife. He remembered that he had wanted to bring it with him and that Busy Buzz had promised it to him, and here it was. He stooped and picked it up and then stopped a moment to open it and examine all its blades and corkscrews, and to be quite sure that it really was his own long-lost jackknife. Now, the one thing you must not do on the Sea of Glass is to stand still. Dick felt his feet slip from under him and put out his hands wildly. He lost his balance, fell, and the sharp blade of the open knife splintered down through the glass with a sound like the smashing of 36 fine wine glasses. The next moment, Dick, still holding the fatal knife, was falling down, down, down through cold green water. Strange to say, he did not feel at all like drowning, but it was very cold and dark and unpleasant, and he heartily wished that he had never had a jackknife. Down, down, down he went, and past a shoal of big fishes who made dreadful faces at him as he whizzed by. Suddenly, before he had entirely grasped what had happened to him, he found himself on solid ground again at the bottom of the sea, rather jarred but otherwise unhurt, and was staring at the oddest sort of creature that he had ever seen. This creature was sitting just in front of him in a sort of cave lined with seashells and pink and white coral. On every side was growing sea grass of scarlet and purple and green, and there were also sea flowers and waving weeds of all kinds and colors. Quivering jellyfish of pink and orange floated through the dim water, and starfish lay about upon the pale, deep sea sand. Swordfish, porpoises, and other ocean things peered in upon the scene, with their queer, fixed goggle eyes. The light seemed to be filtered through a deep green shade. The creature himself was shaped like a man, but he was covered completely with silver-green scales, and had hair like long, lank seaweed. His eyes were as cold and pale and glassy as those of the fishes, and his expression, slight as it was entirely disagreeable.
"This is most annoying,"
he remarked, surveying Dick.
"What are you?"
"Do you mean, who are you?" asked Dick.
"No,"
said the creature.
"What?"
"Oh," said Dick, "I am a little boy."
"I never heard of it,"
said the creature.
"I don't think I like you. You may go."
"Certainly," replied Dick meekly. Do you mind telling me how?"
"I don't care,"
said the creature. After that, conversation stopped for a while, and they merely stared at each other in silence. At last the scaled one spoke again, this time very crossly.
"Why don't you go?"
"I'd be very glad to," said poor Dick. "But you see, I don't know how to go. Would it be too much trouble for you to tell me how to get to the city of the wicked king?"
"What?"
roared the creature, so suddenly and violently that Dick jumped.
"I tell anyone anything about the wicked king? Don't you know that he is the deadliest enemy that I have?"
"Why, no," answered Dick, a little disturbed by this outburst. "Won't you tell me about it, please?" His new acquaintance looked fiercely at him for a moment, and then became suddenly plunged in utter melancholy.
"Ah!"
he sighed, while a tear oozed out of his eye and made a bubble in the green water.
"'Tis a sad tale. Listen, and hear the sorrowful story of the sea kobold."
"Is that you?" asked Dick.
"Who else?"
said the scaly creature. Then, in mournful tones, he began.
"I am the sea kobold. I own the sea and everything in it. Once I owned the surface of the sea too, but that was long ago. I own the pretty green waves with silver crests that break in the bright daylight, and the big black ones that come at night in the dark of the moon. And I own too the little pink ones that you see at sunset, when the west is burning up all the horrid things that have happened during the day. I took a fatherly interest in the little boats that floated there, and in the pretty, long-haired mermaids who swam up into the moonlight to sing love songs to the sailors. The fish that leaped and circled and shone in the purple light of dusk were all my friends, and the big and small winds knew me for their master, and I had a little son, a beautiful scaly son, born in the sea, and fated to inherit my power and my great sea kingdom. But all that was very, very long ago.
He wept. That was surely very nice, said Dick to encourage him.
Nice, it was.
The sea kobold sought for a word. Bully, suggested Dick.
I never heard the adjective,
Said the sea kobold primly.
but I will accept it for the moment. It was bully. What was I saying? Ah, yes. It is a very sad story. The wicked king lives, as you must know, on the further shore of this sea. He has a very pretty daughter with whom Prince Humpty Dumpty used to be in love.
Humpty Dumpty, exclaimed Dick, now all ears.
Yes, don't interrupt, please. It distracts my mind. Well, the wicked king wanted her to marry someone else, a gentleman named Grump, I believe, and forbade her to even see Humpty Dumpty. But of course, the lovers would not obey him. He was so cruel and unkind always that his daughter did not think it wrong to do as he had told her not to, and for my part, I did not either. Humpty Dumpty came every night and sang love songs to her, and one night he came in a beautiful little boat made out of a big shell with a sail spun entirely out of rose leaves of different colors. And down by the shore he sang the very prettiest song that he had ever sung, or that anyone else had ever sung for that matter. And that I know, for I was listening. A very pretty song it was, to be sure. We were great friends, he and I held his boat between two quiet waves when he went on shore to meet the princess. And down she came from the city wall gate, holding up her skirts daintily, and looking as sweet as possible. And he got into the seashell boat, and I puffed a breeze to fill the rose-leaf sail, and off they sailed. But just then, who should appear upon the shore but the wicked king himself, and Grump with him. Grump, who was half a wizard, and a very disagreeable person, besides being very much in love with the little princess, jumped into the sea and swam after the boat. The wicked king stood on the shore and raved and threatened and swore. I tried my best to drown Grump, but he wouldn't sink any more than a piece of cork, and in spite of all my efforts, he overtook the boat and pulled it slowly back to the shore. Grump made some magic passes over the prow of the little seashell skiff, and oh, 'tis so sad. When the boat reached the shore, there was nothing in it but the princess, crying like a baby, and beside her a big egg. They put poor Humpty Dumpty in his new shape on the city wall and shut the pretty little princess up in a high tower. And then they took my little boy Mudge and made him a prisoner too, just to punish me for having helped the young prince. And last of all,
The sea kobold choked.
they put a glass lid over my sea and screwed it down tight. And now I can never go up to the surface any more, and there are no more waves, and no more boats, and no more mermaids singing in the moonlight to the sailors, and no more.
The sea kobold dissolved into tears. Oh, cheer up, said Dick absent-mindedly. He was too much interested in the sea kobold's story to pay much attention to his grief. Do you happen to know just where the princess is now? He asked. The sea kobold shook his head.
No,
he answered.
I know that she is in the highest tower in the Red City.
The highest tower? That's something to know anyway, said Dick thoughtfully. He was glad to know that in the Red City he would have one person ready to help him if it were possible. And now, he added, would you be so kind, please, as to tell me how to get to the Red City?
I'm sure I don't know, anyway,
said the sea kobold mournfully.
Since that glass cover was screwed on. By the by, how did you get here?
He asked suddenly. I fell, and my knife broke a hole in the glass, explained Dick. He showed the offending blade and then shut and dropped it into his pocket.
Well, go back through it then,
said the sea kobold.
While we are on the subject, I will tell you that I'm glad you have made a hole. I can go up now and then to look out, though of course I shall never dare to stay very long for fear the wicked king or Grump might see me and plan some fresh trouble for me. Now, goodbye. I can't be bothered with you any more.
And he closed his fishy eyes and appeared to sleep. Since there seemed nothing more to be gained by staying where he was, Dick turned his back on the sea kobold and his cave and walked off among the rocks and the big ocean trees that were scattered along the bottom of the sea. He felt rather discouraged and lonely, for he could not imagine how he should ever get up again to the hole he had made in the glass. It occurred to him that he might climb one of the queer, tall, lanky sea trees, but when he stopped to look, he could see that the top did not nearly reach to the surface. What was going to happen to him next, he wondered. He soon found out. Chapter 10. A Fish Tea Party. As Dick walked along on the dim brown grey sand on the bottom of the sea, he began to notice, as his eyes grew more and more accustomed to the faint greenish light, the many marvels which were all around him. Never, in after years, could he quite recall all the strange and beautiful things that he saw during that submarine stroll. But what he did remember made him long many times to visit the sea floor once again and look at the wonderful sights which were to be seen there. Besides the masses of many-colored seaweed and the odd, bright-hued sea flowers that grew there were whole forests of coral, snow-white, pale yellow, and deep scarlet. There were narrow rock baths, where gold glittered in the crevices, and great lumps of brown and yellow agate gleamed dimly through the water. There were heaps of pearls, as though some mysterious sea miser had been collecting and hoarding them, and garnets that made the water all around look as though it were dyed crimson. The sea moss of purple and red and dull green hung waveringly from the rocks, and lay in patches on the sand floor, like strange, gaudy rugs. The sea trees moved slowly with the faint motion of the deep sea currents, and in the distance looked like dark green shadows staring across a sheet of glass. Everywhere were shells, large and small, pink, white, black, and grey, lying at his feet, lodged in niches in the dark, black rocks, floating caught in tangles of dull seaweed. And everywhere, too, were fishes, some of them quite ordinary-looking creatures, but others different from any other Dick had ever seen, even in picture books. Suddenly, the rock-walled path which he had been following came to an end, and he found himself in a huge, green-washed clearing, with distant walls and a clean-swept sandy floor. This place was filled with all sorts of strange sea creatures, principally fish, although there were several queer things that did not look as though they belonged in the natural history books. In the very center of the big crowded circle sat an old woman in dark green cloak and hood, which floated away from her skinny face and figure whenever she waved her arm, which she did very often, for she seemed to be the mistress of ceremonies down here, and all the other creatures listened with respect to what she said. When she saw Dick, she beckoned to him, and he went up to her feeling even more frightened than when he had faced Mother Goose or the sea kobold. "I am the old witch of the sea," she said, "and my husband is the old man of the sea. Have you ever read Sinbad the Sailor?" Dick shook his head. "In that case," said the witch thoughtfully, "I am not sure whether or not you would better stay to tea." "Oh, is this a party?" asked Dick eagerly, looking around him with new interest. "Yes," said the witch proudly. "I give a tea party every week for the fish. The sea kobold, the real ruler of this sea, has become so bad-tempered since they screwed him in here that he won't do a single thing for the amusement of his poor, unfortunate subjects. So, of course, I feel it my duty to do what I can to cheer them up. Do you know him, by the way?" "The sea kobold," said Dick, a little bewildered. "Yes, I have met him. He didn't seem to like me very much, though." "Dear, dear," said the witch. "Then I'll warrant that he never even offered you a cup of tea." "No, indeed," answered Dick. "Dear, dear," exclaimed the witch again. "Then you must certainly come to my tea party, even if you have never heard of my husband, the old man of the sea." She motioned Dick to sit down on the sand between two horrid-looking fishes and began to bustle about hospitably among a number of queer-shaped shells which, Dick gathered, took the place of cups at fish tea parties. "With or without salt?" asked the witch. Dick started. I beg your pardon," he stammered. "What did you say?" "I said with or without salt," snapped the witch, holding a pink and orange shell in her hand. "Without, I think. Thank you," answered Dick as politely as he could. "You are making a great mistake," the witch told him seriously. "Never take tea in the sea without salt." Dick said he would take salt after all, and the witch brought him the pink and orange shell filled with a pale liquid which tasted as though it were made of seaweed. As a matter of fact, it was made of seaweed. "Why doesn't it spill out?" he asked. "Why doesn't what spill out?" said the witch. The tea," said Dick, wondering more and more how you could drink liquid when you were sitting under the water. "Because there isn't anywhere to spill it," said the witch. "Stupid!" Dick drank his salt tea and found that it tasted better after you had become a little used to it. The fish seemed to enjoy it immensely. As they all sipped their tea, Dick had a chance to look at his fellow guests more closely. They were a queer collection. On one side of him sat a big skatefish, which looked so ridiculous that Dick was afraid to stare at him long lest he should laugh out loud. He looked just like a big pie plate with an eye set in each side and the funniest little wisp of a tail that you ever saw. On the other was a shark with a grey back, white waistcoat effect, a square head and two enormous sets of saw-like teeth. Next came a mackerel, all brown and dappled. Then a bluefish, almost black in color. Then a silver salmon. Then a huge-mouthed chard. Then a haddock, a cod, and a porpoise, which seemed to have some trouble in overcoming its desire to keep jumping all the time. Then a butterfish, flat like a small pancake. Then a short, stumpy porgy. Then a bullhead, thick and dull-looking, with two little delicate horns on its ugly forehead. Then a sea trout, with the prettiest suit of orange spotted brown and deep pink. Then a swordfish, waving his sword snout about in what looked like a very dangerous manner. Then a bass and a sunfish with fins set above and below like enormous sun rays. On the farther side of the great circle there were a number of even more extraordinary fish. There was an octopus, or devilfish, the kind that tried to pull sailors out of their boats and crush them to death with their long, strong, innumerable arms. A tarpon, huge and beautiful. A cuttlefish, floating in a sort of inky halo, and, far in the background, a monster whale. He had an appetite in keeping with his size, and the old witch of the sea had to take him 50 shells of tea before he was even sufficiently satisfied to blow his thanks in a great spurt of foaming water. Dick also noticed a number of green lobsters and crabs of all sizes, and scattered about on the ground were masses of oysters, clams, mussels, and scallops, the small round shells making the prettiest sort of a pattern in blue, grey, and black. Then, too, there were countless eels, wriggling their long greyish-green snaky bodies through the water on all sides. But after a while all the seaweed tea was drunk, and even the whales swam lumberingly away, and all the smaller fishes wriggled their thanks to the witch and departed likewise, and Dick was left quite alone with his hostess. "And now," said the old witch of the sea, "what can I do for you, little mortal boy?" Dick explained his trouble and asked her if she could not possibly help him to reach the surface of the water and continue his journey to the city of the wicked king. "No," said the witch, shaking her head thoughtfully. "I am wise and old, oh, very, very old indeed, but I cannot help you in this. But I can take you to someone who can help you. Only you must come with me obediently and do everything that I tell you to, and not stop to talk with the sea folk on your way." "Oh, indeed, indeed, I will do just what you tell me to," cried Dick earnestly. "May we not start at once, please? And, he said hesitatingly, "I am very much obliged for the tea." The old witch of the sea bowed with dignity and said, "You are entirely welcome, I am sure," in a very grand way. Then, as they began to walk on across the sand, she proceeded to talk further about herself, her great age, and her even greater wisdom. "You see," said the witch, "I am one of the oldest inhabitants of the ocean. I it was who gave Hans Andersen's poor little mermaid her pretty feet that hurt her so terribly until she was turned into sea foam. I told Mr. Andersen about the matter myself, by the by, and I fitted out Sinbad's cave, and I sent word to the 3 Rhine maidens to come here and live after they had gotten back their gold. I explained that the Walburic and the gods and all those other horrid interfering creatures were very properly dead and gone. They never could tell what might happen in that Rhine neighborhood. Horrid, scandalous place, I call it. So they came here to live. Would you like to call on them? They live just around the corner." And without waiting for Dick to answer, she whisked him around a big black rock and into the presence of 3 very pretty young women, who were swimming about and singing a soft rippling song. In a cleft on the rock glowed something bright and yellow. Dick did not know then that it was the famous Rhine gold. "I want to present to you," began the witch. But the 3 young women only cried, "We are busy guarding our gold. Don't interrupt us." And they began to sing and swim faster than ever. "Mannerless creatures," grumbled the witch, as they went on their way once more. almost as bad as that Lorelei girl. She lives farther down the rock street, so we won't call on her. She's just as ungrateful as the rest, though I got her here too." At that moment, a crowd of children came romping by. They were queer-looking little things, half of their bodies made up of scales and fins and fish tails, and the other half of rosy pink and white flesh and blood. With them came a number of strange fishy animals that barked. "What are they?" asked Dick. "Mer children with their pets, the sea dogs," responded the witch. "Come and play with us," cried the mer children when they saw Dick. "Come and play with the starfish and have a ride on one of our sea horses." But the witch would not let him join them, even for a moment. "The mer people are dangerous folk," she told him. "These children are not like the water babies of whom you may have heard. If you played with these too long, you would lose your own human soul and become a make-believe person like the rest of us." They went on in silence for a minute or two. "Oh, how pretty!" cried Dick suddenly. He pointed to a group of lovely maidens and handsome young men, all with bodies that entered in shining fish tails, who were swimming gracefully through the water, while two sad-faced men with wreaths of pale blue flowers in their hair played a soft, slow melody upon harps. "The mermen and mermaids are having a ball," said the witch, "and they have induced two of the Necker folk to play for them. The Necker are the saddest race of elves in the water, for they are always longing for souls to be given them. Even while they play for the gay mer people to dance, they are thinking of the souls they have not yet won." They passed all sorts of queer beasts as they journeyed on. There were not only sea horses and sea dogs, but sea serpents that seemed to have been painted all the colors of the rainbow, and shiny emerald green sea dragons, and one terrible great thing which seemed to be half asleep, and about which the witch said that a gentleman called Tennyson had once written a poem. She said that the name of the thing was the Kraken. So on and on they went until Dick's mind had become a sort of vague jumble of queer fishy sights, and it seemed as though he had lived forever at the bottom of the sea. And suddenly he discovered that he was alone. The old witch of the sea had left him, and he was all by himself in the awful dark green depths of the ocean that lay under the sea of glass. What had become of his guide? Had she left him on purpose? Or had she been called away in some queer fairy way which he did not understand? Or was it possible that she had indeed brought him to the place where he was to be given the help he had asked? He looked about him on every side, and even up into the green water over his head. But he could not see even a fish. He was utterly alone this time. Now, at last, everything was quite hopeless. "Dear, dear, dear," cried a sweet, half-mocking voice beside him. "What is the matter? Why do you look so sad, little mortal boy?" Dick is trapped. The pressure is mounting, and now a voice from the shadows. Who's mocking our hero at his lowest point? And what awaits him in the depths? I'll pick up right here next time as we travel into the city of the Wicked King. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out the descent into the city. And if you have enjoyed this story, hit that like button, and I'll see you in the next video. Till then, take care and bye-bye.